Thank you so much, Carla. So I know a thing or two about siblings because I have 3 of them. I am the youngest of 4, and I have 3 big sisters. So my parents were actually so convinced that they were going to have a 4th girl that they named me Emily before I was born, and then had to sort of slightly rethink things in the maternity ward. But I am a volunteer with CAMA, but I'm not a member of the storytelling team, so I wasn't involved in choosing the theme for tonight. And when I found out that they had chosen the theme of siblings, it got me thinking about how my own relationships with my siblings have changed since I've been here in the US. And as Carla said, I originally moved here to do a master's 8 years ago, and I didn't intend to stay. I certainly never thought of myself as an immigrant. And I then was very fortunate to get a job in a think tank, and 8 years later, here I am. I recently got married, and so am sort of officially becoming, in legal terms, shifting from being on a work visa to now a marriage-based green card. And when I started thinking about my siblings, I guess my first thoughts were guilt and selfishness. So, guilt. This weekend it was my older sister's 40th birthday, and I joined the celebration by Zoom, and all the rest of my family were there at my parents' house. I could hear my nieces running around screaming like banshees, and as they usually do, and it, I think, has sort of reinforced the guilt that I feel. For 8 years, I have missed every birthday, I've missed every new job, I've missed celebrating the births of my nieces as well. And I guess all my 4 nieces are under the age of 8, so I have only ever known them, or they've only grown up while I've been a figure on Zoom. And let me tell you, trying to Skype with a 3-year-old is not always a very successful experience. And I know that through the COVID lockdown, lots of us got used to singing Happy Birthday over Zoom. I've had 8 years of experience of this, and so I'm something of a professional, but it is still terrible. Every time, it's not fun singing Happy Birthday over Zoom. So I certainly, I feel guilty that I have missed out on so many occasions. The second feeling I mentioned is selfishness. People, I suppose you have certain duties as a member of a family, and I feel that I have shirked a lot of those duties. I'm very lucky my parents haven't been unwell and so haven't needed caring for so far, but at some point they probably will, and it's not likely that I will be there for it. I have never babysat for my nieces. I haven't been there for the celebrations that I mentioned. I sort of feel guilty about that, but I also haven't been there to support my sisters. I've not been there to give them a hug when they needed help. And people immigrate for a whole host of different reasons, and I moved here for selfish reasons, right? I am not making those sacrifices to my role as a member of a family in order to support my family. They're not benefiting at all from me being here. And that's something that I've had to sort of grapple with. So yeah, I guess that the immediate two emotions that I felt were guilt and selfishness. But then I think of my sisters, and I think that they have been the most incredible source of support to me over the last 8 years. And I only came out when I moved here, when I moved to the US. And a lot of people might think of the UK, and you might think of it as a relatively progressive place. But let me tell you, it's not all like that. I'm from a very, very small village in the middle of the UK, in the middle of England, and I didn't know a single gay person growing up. And I I made the decision to come out after I moved here, and my sisters, of everyone in my life, were my biggest cheerleaders. And they really went to quite extraordinary lengths to support me by always being there, always picking up the phone whenever I wanted to talk. They shielded me from a huge amount of things that they thought would cause me pain. I don't want to go into it in a lot of detail, but let me just say it wasn't a smooth process with all members of my family. And they even went to some quite extreme measures. One threatened to withhold access to her children unless other members of my family changed their ways. And I think kind of more recently, I guess, about the role that my siblings have played in my life. And I think about my wedding. As I mentioned, I married my wonderful husband is right here tonight. And we, because I'm British and he's American, we split our wedding up into different parts. And we had the ceremony over in the UK, and then we had more of a party over here. And the aim was to try and make sure that Ian's family and a lot of his American friends and our American friends wouldn't have to make the flight over there. And I honestly didn't know how many of my family, if any at all, would come. But all three of my sisters came. One of them came leaving her two daughters for the first time. She'd never been away from them, and she left them. One of them and her partner flew all the way from Saudi Arabia. And another one brought her 3-year-old and her, I think at the time, 6-month-old. So sorry to the other people on the plane. But they were all there, and I asked them to serve as, rather than a best man, as kind of best women. And so they didn't all speak. One of them is not so much of a public speaker, but she was involved in the technical side. And the other two stood up in front of a room of people who they basically didn't know at all, and said the most incredible things about me and about our relationship. And it really, sitting there listening to it made me think, yes, the guilt is there, the feeling of selfishness is still there. But there is something about a relationship with a sibling which is different, and which endures, and which will be with you through thick and thin. And so even with 8 years of living over here, and I guess thinking now of my future and going forward, I'm very confident that my siblings will continue to play a really remarkable role in my life, and I'm very grateful for them.